at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.
Shop Velvet Online Women's Boutique to spice up your closet with trendy, unique looks. We have fashionable and chic looks at very affordable prices. Velvet Boutique offers free shipping all year long on all orders. Shop online at www.melvetboutique.com. That's www.melvetboutique.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. Shop Velvet Online Women's Boutique.
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Sugar Chateau Desserts is a specialty bakery located in the Charlotte, North Carolina metro area. We will create delicious and one-of-a-kind treats for any occasion. Sugar Chateau is currently shipping cakes in a jar, offering a variety of different flavors in a single-serve container that can help you celebrate in accordance with social distancing. Place your orders today by calling 803-526-7895 or visiting sugarchateaudesserts.com.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Welcome to episode 125, the weekend edition of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The shows that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports, for institutions large and small, from the NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Charles Bishop is on assignment, or he has the cement bricks, or it's just getting a little too rough in the SWAC right now for him. We'll discuss that more on Tuesday. However, we have Joe Clay from 1876 sitting in, and we brought Tolly, Carr back from HBCU Game Day as we promised, as he was down there in Montgomery, so we get some real insight of what's going on here. But before I start all that, let me just say, I heard somebody's trying to sneak in my frat. It ain't gonna be no like that. Joe, Mike, you know a little something about that? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong show. Wrong.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do know a little something about that.
Yeah, we'll tell you a little more about that on Tuesday, but that's the wrong show. That's the wrong show. Tolly, you know how we get excited sometimes. You've been part of the HBCU scene. The alphas, the omegas, sigmas, we just go all over the place, deltas, AK. Wow.
You need to talk a little me, 5 me. I can get in on that one.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's it. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. Joe, you did a good job. You stayed quiet. You said you don't want none of that fire. You trying to stay out of any issues here right now. So I saw you. Good move. Keep it clean.
I don't want to mess it up.
No.
Well said. Well, we had a big Saturday yesterday. The big game of the weekend was Alabama A&M going to Jackson State. The first question was, would Alabama A&M really get a chance to hit the field after about being a month off and 5 cancellations? And if they did, how would they look? Obviously, everybody wanted to know, could Jackson State rebound? Could they get it back together? Quarterback switch. 2 big-time coaches, Coach Maynard, Coach Prime in terms of Coach Sanders. Coach Maynard, if you caught the show on Thursday, you can tell he can talk it and chuck it up with the best of the coaches out there. And so everybody's wanting to know, would he live up to it? Akil Glass, big-time prospect. People wanted to see what he could get done. And it certainly lived up to the hype for the Alabama A&M Bulldogs. Let me go to you first, Joe Clay. In terms of 52-43 offensive galore, not a lot of defense played in that game. What were your initial thoughts before we dive deep into the numbers?
Well, as you said, there was not a lot of defense played in that game. However, Akil Glass, if you haven't seen him before, now you understand who this dude is. He was 30 for 47, put up 323 yards, just dominated the game. The stats really don't even tell a story. He was unbelievable. Not only is he probably the best quarterback in the SWAC, but he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, in my opinion.
Man, great point. Put it out there. Let's discuss a little bit about that. Mike, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Before you get in, filling your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I think he's certainly competitive with some of the top quarterbacks in the FCS, without question. I think going into this game, you needed that one more data point for Alabama A&M, and I think the story of the game is they kind of put the SWAC on notice in terms of their receiving core. We talk about Akil Glass, but their receivers average about $1 each. I think Abraham was just 6 yards shy of 100 yards, had 2 touchdowns. That offense makes you cover a lot of ground. And when you have future potential pro quarterbacks in Akil Glass to spread the ball, I think they put the SWAC on notice that this is a formidable offense that you're going to have to deal with. So great game. There wasn't a lot of defense. I think the battle at the line of scrimmage actually favored Alabama A&M, but this is nothing new to Jackson State. So a lot to unpack in this game.
Did you just put all these folks under the bus like that, just that quick? He said another data point. He says another data point. My analytics folks just get excited about all this. So since he's talking about another data point, you had the football. Obviously, you were covering the game in Montgomery, so we'll even go a little more deeper into that one. But before we do that, it's my understanding that you were able to watch the game too. You have all these nice technological tricks that you have, and you were making sure that you kept an eye on what was going on there. So based on that, what were your thoughts?
I got a lot of love for this school right here. I don't have a dog in the fight because I'm not SWAC bred. I'm a CIAA alum, so I'm a fan, if nothing else. But just the excitement that and the energy that Jackson State brings. Look, I was shooting the game in Montgomery. I was looking around in my camera bag. I was like, there's got to be a way I can kind of watch this game and pay attention to what I'm doing, man. So I found the articulating arm and a vice grip. Probably only our producer Roy can understand what I'm talking about here. But man, I hooked that thing up on my camera. I had one eye on my game and one eye on ESPN. And I don't know how many other schools I would do that for. And there's just something about what's happening at Jackson State right now that, even when they're not winning, it's almost like the Cowboys in the NFL. And I don't even watch the NFL anymore, but it's just something about their product now, man. And of course, a lot of it has to do with Deion Sanders, but it just draws your eye to whatever they're doing. But shout out to Akil Glass, and Coach Sanders talks about this all the time. Even though they lost, a lot of people who maybe otherwise didn't know how good Glass was got a chance to see him yesterday, and kudos to him for taking advantage of that opportunity. But yeah, man, I if I had two more eyes yesterday, I would have used all four of them trying to keep up with the SWAC.
Yeah,
man, I love it. I love it. With that, let me give some shout out to folks that jumped on here. Alan Malone, any ideas as to who is the new number one in the HBCU football team? We can jump in there and ask that question. Our poll doesn't come out until officially on Tuesday. It is sponsored by HBCU Game Day. Stephen A. Miller, Phi Beta Sigma is in the house. Yes, jump out there. I see you. Jackson State needs to find some defense. Yeah, pretty much. Roy Mobb, go Mobb. So people didn't know about that. So I guess that fraternity and sorority stuff, people may know about that. Alan Malone says our version of Big 12 football. Good stuff. Good stuff.
No defense.
No defense whatsoever.
Bernadette R. Arrington, John Johnson, Alan Malone, Demetri Glenn has jumped in there and shown us some love. Come on, give Alabama A&M the love. Oh, yeah. Alabama A&M showed up. Obviously, still a little question on defense, but you cannot say anything about what they did on the offense. Mike jumped out there and talked about the wide receivers, and I think on defense it's not as bad as the 43 points they gave up. I think the move at the quarterback position for Jackson State is going to be intriguing too moving forward in terms of what that competition may look like in the fall. He looked pretty good. And I thought he provided Jackson State the ability to put the ball up in the air a little more than their previous starting quarterback in regards to being able to be more fleet of foot. And so I think it was a combination of the two. And then they found a running back that came walk-on that showed out, that gave Jackson State, a little more running attack that you traditionally from their line. So let's talk about that. See, you want to jump back in here, Mike. Go a little more detail and a little depth in terms of that part of the game. What did you see specifically that excited?
Well, I thought the freshman Quincy Casey came in and did a tremendous job. He moved the ball. A lot of that was play selection. They opened up the playbook a little bit. There were a few plays. I had a chance to see the first half, and then I had my birthday dinner, so I had to give my attention to my wife because she was treating me, of course. But so
you get a birthday dinner.
I said later, Dion, I'll catch you later. So anyway, if you look at the way Quincy played in the first half, he played relatively well. There were 2 or 3 plays where you could tell maybe the offense wasn't in sync. He threw a few passes where receivers were supposed to be. His receivers weren't looking for the ball. So that'll come. But I think all in all, he gave them a chance to win. And I think the running back that came in, I think they have 2 injuries, Santi Marshall. I think he had 126 yards. He came in and did not bad for a walk-on. So he stepped up and to show to be the formidable running back, the starting running back, or at least the first, because they tend to do running back by committee. So he'll be one of the members of that committee. So tremendous job on the offensive. I like the way they opened up the playbook a little bit more this week with Quincy.
Yeah, Quincy showed out in a lot of ways. He had 4 touchdowns himself. And then the transfer running back that you speak of, transfer from Division II SIAC.
Yes, I'm sorry. Transfer.
As Tolly jumps up there and shows some love for CIAA, he also covers the SIAC. And so Miles College, that has ran rampant over that part of the conference in football. Some of the other sports, just to shout out Miles College, but they're getting it done in athletics. But talking a little bit about, the shine that is going out from Dion, Tolly, going back to you, who else stood out in the game, just as you have one eye focused on that? So it's interesting getting your perspective. What did you see that stood out from that perspective, since you didn't hear it, but you were able to really watch it? So that's different.
I was watching the receivers, and I couldn't follow the commentary as close as I wanted to with Tiffany and Jay on the call. But Brian Jenkins is always a kid that I watch. He's football is in his DNA. His dad was a big time head coach and was an assistant coach at Alabama A&M for a while. And just the ability, along with the other receivers, for Akil Glass to throw those guys open, and it just seemed a different level, just slightly from what you see, as opposed to someone running open and catching the ball, and the way Glass was able to throw to a spot. And those guys knew where that spot was. And the timing was off on a couple of plays, but for them to be that precise for just their second game of the year, it's one thing to have a great quarterback, but you also have to have the receivers to get to that spot where the ball is going to be delivered to. So, and Jenkins is a talker too. I'm sure one of the reasons he loves playing for Maynard. So it was good to see him out there performing well too.
Yeah, much like his father, he's not scared to tell you what he thinks. And for those that love the chat in the game behind the scenes, it's great to do that. And it looked like he got in Jackson State's thought, because they were making some penalties late in the game where I think they allowed the talk to get to him. And you can't play for a coach that talks it up, and then you can't understand that you got to talk it up, but you got to be able to dish it out and take it. So one thing we know in terms of Coach Prime is that the fact that he dish it out, but he can take it as well. He knows that that's part of the game that's going to draw eyes. You always talk about that, Tolly. Who's going to be his foil? Is it Willie Simmons? Is it Coach Maynard? We'll get a chance maybe to get in there a little more, but you just talked about those wide receivers, and I want to give it up. 440 yards for those receivers. Moore, Larry, 114 yards, 1 touchdown. Area, 100 yards, 1 touchdown. Ibrahim, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jenkins, as you spoke of, 66 yards. Quarles, 47 yards. That's the running back, and a touchdown. Howard, 15 yards. So they spread the ball around in terms of everybody got a chance to get in the end zone, it seems, in terms of what they do. And not only did Akil Glass have the 6 touchdown passes, he actually ran 1 in 2. So he found a way to get it done in so many different ways. Last thing before we go to the next game that we'll break down, which will be the Alabama State hosting Mississippi Valley, I wanted to get Joe back in here and give any final thoughts on this matchup, things that stood out to him or anybody else that he wanted to talk about.
I would say the running back situation for Jackson State is going to be very interesting, because that young man showed himself well. I don't see how there's any way he doesn't get major touches going forward. The quarterback position next year is going to be very interesting. I think everyone assumed that the new prime time on campus was going to get the first opportunity, but Casey showed himself very well. Remember, he's a redshirt freshman. He's still young. He's got a lot of room to grow. He's a big, strong QB with a very good arm, in my opinion. And he may be a little bit ahead of young Sanders in the playbook in his development. So I think if anyone who thought that it was going to be a one horse race, it may be 2 next year in the fall. So that's going to be very interesting.
I say 3. So, yeah. I say
quite possibly.
We talk about Jackson State, and then we go back to Alabama A&M. Well, now you have the big matchup. Jackson State does get another victory before they close out the season. They were supposed to play Alcorn State this game. I can guarantee you that they'll win that game. They went 2-0. Those that don't realize that Alcorn State, as they pulled out the league decided that all their games that they were going to be played would be forfeit. And so as it goes in the record book, it's a 2-0 score in terms of the forfeit. So those teams get a win in that nature. So it'd be fascinating to see how that goes. So they do get that win. But the reason I bring that up is because now you have the other big matchups. And we'll get deep into those matchups with the Magic City Classic. But that becomes big because Alabama State pulled away from Mississippi Valley in that game and won 42-17. So before we get into the Magic City Classic, which is the game coming up this week, let's talk about what Alabama State was able to do against Valley. And I'm going to go, obviously, to Tolly first. He was down there. So first, tell us about the atmosphere, and then particularly into some frameworks of the game that stood out for you.
Well, I was a little late to the game. I had some family obligations in Atlanta that I had to take care of. Shout out to my wife. She's starting a new job with ProPublica. Doc, I'm the least talented media person in my house, man. That is that's how it goes for me.
I can relate to that. You're not the only brother not having all the shine.
Exactly.
So she had some things she had to do to in preparation for a new job, and so I had to take care of the boy because he will wreck the party wherever he goes. So I missed the first quarter, but when I pulled up into Montgomery, it was 14-10, man, and it was hard to tell that a football game was going on because the last time I was there was the Jackson State, Alabama State game. And, I was there from the very beginning, man, and just the energy. These were the same COVID protocols, same amount of people allowed into the stadium, man. It was just a different vibe there. Not as many people. And you really couldn't tell the game was going on to you. I was like, man, it wasn't in Valley, was it? Oh, it's here in Montgomery. But it was 14-10 when I got there. And Mississippi Valley State played really, really well. The other day, Charles and I had the predictions, and we both said 21-17. I said 21-17 in favor of Alabama State, and Charles said 21-17 in favor of Valley. And heading into the fourth quarter, that's where we were, 21-17. But Coach Dancy made a call that really changed the complexion of the game. It was 4th and short. And this was one of those SWAC situations. Mississippi Valley State thought they had converted on 3rd down and thought they had a 1st down. And then the referees came back and after a long delay said, you know what, we need to remeasure this previous play. So it turned out to be a 4th down instead of a 1st down. And after a long delay, it was hard to tell what was going to happen. And then Coach Dancy just had his guys rush to the line of scrimmage and try to catch Alabama State off guard. And they were deep in their own territory. They were like inside the 30, it might have been like around the 25-yard line. And, that Alabama State defensive line, man, they are big and tough. And so they snuffed out the, little quarterback sneak. And so Mississippi Valley State turned it over on downs. And then Ryan Nettles was able to run it in for a touchdown either the very next play or 2 plays later. And that really turned the momentum of the game. I mean, in the start of the fourth quarter, Mississippi Valley State could have won that game based on how they were playing. But when they went Riverboat Ron, man, and it backfired on them. And then they tried it again later. They were already down 2 scores, same scenario, deep in their own territory, 4th and short. They tried it and didn't get it, and Alabama State was able to score again. So the final score is the score because Alabama State had 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, but it does not really show how good that game was through the first 3 quarters. And it really shows how one bad decision can really, turn the entire game around. But Mississippi Valley State not ready to contend for a championship. Alabama State, maybe, but Mississippi Valley State, I think, is a lot better with Coach Dancy than people might give them credit for if you're just looking at the box score from afar. Especially, you look at Jackson State, they only had 3 days of practice heading into that game. They played a lot better against UAPB, and through 3 quarters, they were right there with Alabama State. And Eason, he can run, he can make the throws. He's not a kill glass, but he did a very good job. So I was impressed by both teams yesterday.
Yeah, I had a chance. I was watching actually both games, sitting in the garage. As I talk about the fraternity, they had the Spring Fest. So I got to take Deuce, my son, as you talk about your young son as well. So we go out there, and usually we are out there, but obviously with COVID protocols, they had the driveway where you just went and picked up either your crawfish or fish. And so we picked up the crawfish, so we decided to open up the garage as we're still working on the backyard in terms of that component, and had the TV set up, let him play around, and we ate the crawfish, so it was good for all of us. As you talked about your wife, my wife loved that because she got some of her time back. And so I make it work. I try to win where I can win. I understand how this game plays, happy wife, happy life.
Man, you better know it.
Absolutely.
Right. So with that being said, as we kind of get back to the real component of the show, talking about football, but there was a component of the game where it looked like Valley actually was going to take the lead at that point, as you were saying, it was 14-10. What happened in that component where they had a turnover and they were deep in Alabama State territory, and it looked like they had scored? They took the points off the board. What was that?
There were actually two touchdowns that were ruled a touchdown and overturned, and you can see the highlights on our YouTube channel. Just type in HBCU Game Day, and you can see those. And in that package, I kind of gently made the joke of "Welcome to the SWAC" when it comes to calls being one thing and then being another. But on that particular play, Jelani Eason, I think maybe line of scrimmage was maybe 3-yard line inside the 5. He runs it in, and right when he's crossing the plane, he's in there. Somebody reaches their hand in, and you see the ball kind of do that, then it squirts out. But the call on the field was touchdown. And I fought with the camera. I followed Eason back to the sidelines, and Coach Dancy went up to him. He said, "You stuck it out over the goal line, right?" And he was like, "Yeah." Nope. But they looked at it and they ruled it a touchback. So Mississippi Valley State was in a position to go ahead, and instead of a touchdown, they got a touchback.
Wow,
that's what I thought. Being there, I wanted to really get a little insight of that, and multiple reasons. Obviously, I'm gonna go to Mike next. And Mike say, "Valley, we talking about Valley," and so to Valley's credit, or to Mike's credit, oftentimes that is true, but because you don't necessarily watch Valley, sometimes you don't get the indication of the improvement. Now, that doesn't mean, like you said, that they're going to be in the championship picture, but you see that going in that direction. So I wanted you to share those points as we take people inside the numbers from a perspective that you don't get everywhere. Like you said, you can go to HBCU Game Day and get the highlights so you can really understand. And we want our fans in the lab to really be introspective. Understanding, particularly from this show on Sundays, as we go that deeper dive and go inside the numbers, that you get a perspective that you can go out and talk to people that you can't get anywhere else. But with that being said, let Mike crack this egg this morning since we got you all up early to say his thing.
I told you, and Charles. Every year y'all say, "Watch out for Valley." Valley? We talking Valley? Practice? We talking? No. I feel like Stephen A. when he gets on the Cowboys. If you watch any of his shows, I don't know if you do or not, every time he's like, "Just wait, just wait, it's coming." So I didn't have a chance to watch the game. I predicted that, or my call was that Alabama State would win. However, I will have to back a little bit because I did see a few plays, at least maybe 25% of the game, just various plays. It was my first time getting to see Valley play, and I will agree with Tolly that if you haven't seen them, they are a much more improved football team. They're still 1-3. They're in the sellers of the East, but they are improved. I'd like to see what this Valley team looks like in the fall because the quarterback Eason, if you watch him play, he made some great plays. He is a sound quarterback and is capable of moving this offense. I think if you look at the statistics, I mean, Valley, I think, held the ball more for or occupied the offensive side of the field for more time on the clock. They also, and I think Alabama State had 4 turnovers versus no, I'm sorry, Mississippi Valley had 4 turnovers. I don't know if they were key points in the game where these turnovers occurred, but as always, turnovers is big in the game. So I do kind of, put a grin on my face to Dr. Cavil and say Valley, but I say that I'm only going to give you one Valley because this is a much better Valley team than people expect to see. And I agree, you can't just look at the stats because it's more about the stats, but I don't think they're ready to challenge anybody at the top of the East just yet. And a lot of that will come with experience and time. So that's my take on it. But I'd have to ask someone who was at the game, where did those turnovers come? Because 4 turnovers is big in a game that was 21-17 through the third quarter.
Certainly great points when you look at that, when you look at those turnovers and watching it. And as Tolly alluded to, those turnovers, that's not even including the turnovers on downs, were critical in terms of that. I'm gonna go to Joe and then we'll wrap this segment up and start looking at Delaware State. But I do want to say, as we go and dive into some of the games next week on the second half of the show, if you would, which we're coming up to, is the fact that you have the game between Valley and Texas Southern. Both teams get a victory because of the forfeit from Alcorn State. So they come in with a win in their records, but not on the field. So it's going to be interesting because I think in a lot of ways that's going to be significant for both coaches in regards who's able to get that victory and get some tremendous momentum going into the fall 2021. Last time the two teams played, Valley got it done, but it was in Valley. This time it's in Houston, so that's fascinating. But Valley put up 350 yards against a very strong defense. So I think that says some measures too in terms of what that looks like. So I'm gonna go to Joe and get his final thoughts on this matchup between Valley and Alabama State.
I'll say I'm happy for the alumni of Mississippi Valley because the team is obviously much better, much improved than past years. For them to put up, to make that showing and make this game very competitive against a good Alabama State school says a lot. Now, I think they did give the game away. Obviously, in the fourth quarter, they gave up 21 points in the fourth quarter. I think not only is it bad decision making, but it just shows that their lack of depth probably had a part to play in giving up those points, along with some self-inflicted wounds. But the 4 turnovers, that's huge. It doesn't matter what part of the game they occurred; those 4 turnovers, I'm sure, played a part in Alabama State scoring some points and forcing Valley's defense back on the field. And I'm sure they were already gassed. They were already exhausted, particularly late in the game. So they've got to get a handle on those turnovers, get that offense more consistent. As Mike stated, their QB Eason did a pretty good job. He's got some talent. They've got some skill at the quarterback position. And so things are looking up for Valley. They're not ready to continue for a championship, but I think from my perspective, they didn't come into this season thinking they were going to contend for a championship. I think they just wanted to see growth and improvement. I think the fans wanted to see a better Valley product on the field, and they're getting that. It may not be showing up in the box scores, but on the field, entertainment value, they're seeing a much better product than they've seen in the past.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah.
Scottie Pippen. I've been sitting here the whole show trying to figure out who Joe sounds like. It just hit me. He's Scottie Pippen's brother.
Scottie Pippen.
I don't have his bank account though.
Don't let Joe.
Always like, hey, Joe, how do you get to do it like that, man?
Joe has his sexy voice on now, so don't let him. He don't talk like that normally. I've known him for a while. Don't let him fool you.
I'm in a dark room, isolated, so it's kind of a mood that's set.
Exactly. He got his sexy voice on. So.
You can't see it, but I've got the walls are painted red in this room. So.
Oh man! All right, guys, we're gonna take a quick break and see if we can pull this back together. This is Dr. Peter inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson, Charles Bishop. Guest with us, a part of the team, I will say, is none other than Joe Clay of 1876 Sports and Culture Podcast and Tolly Carr of the HBCU Game. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your...
Talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Thank you for sticking around with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As we said, Charles Bishop is on assignment, and we're going to keep it there. We're going to keep it clean. It's been one of those shows. As we have Mike Washington, Charles Bishop on assignment. We have our guest here, a part of the team, Joe Clay of 1876 Sports and Culture Podcast, as well as Tolly Carr, bringing it his way from HBCU Game Day. Go check out his stuff, highlights on the game. You got to have those highlights, and certainly you're going to get some updates from the show coming up real quick. So make sure you go to HBCU Game Day in terms of the website, as well as on YouTube, and subscribe. And while you subscribe, and skip on over to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab and hit the subscribe button. If you want all this wonderful information from the HBCU media, marketing, and pundits out there, you got to help us help you, which is part of that is subscribing to YouTube, giving us all the clicks, likes, forwards, telling your friends, go check out these shows, because they are not free without cost, whether it's man hours and time or the financial money that we put into it. And so all the assistance and help we can get really helps tremendously. Thank you, Tolly. Let me know. I just had to get it out there. Well, let's get back into the real sports talk. You had that interstate matchup between Delaware and Delaware State. At one time, you could call it a rival. As late, I'm not sure if you call it a rival, but it's good that this game will be played. Delaware was played, I should say. Delaware came in 3-0 in that matchup, and Delaware State was 2-1. Delaware won 34-14. One of the big things was this is one of the first times where Delaware came over to Delaware State to play the game. So that was significant and good to hear. As you see, Delaware cruised to 4-0 out of the CIAA, while Delaware State falls to 2-2. You also heard this week coming out of HBCU Game Day in regards that the MEAC would not have the automatic bid. So these games for Delaware State coming in 2-0 would have been a huge statement if they were going to try to put themselves in a at-large bid. Obviously, you have that next up with Delaware State and South Carolina State for South Carolina State, in my opinion, to make their last statement in regards, can they put themselves in a position for the at-large bid instead of the automatic bid that the MEAC was looking to have. With that, in terms of this game, really Delaware dominated in many different ways. I'm not sure if it was even as close as the score indicated. Delaware State scored late to make it a little closer contest. But Delaware State in general, similar to Mississippi Valley, I think. Let me go straight to you, Mike. What are your thoughts in terms of what Delaware State was able to do this season, and what does it mean going into the spring?
Well, I think in terms of what they were doing, they did establish somewhat of a tempo and a flow with their offense. I don't think it's revealed in this game. There was really no way that they were going to be competitive, at least statistically and on paper. Delaware, has won the last 9 meetings. They're at the top of their division in Group A in the Colonial Athletic standings. They have a redshirt senior running back, DeJorn Lee, who rushed for, I think, 220 yards and 2 touchdowns against their previous opponents. So a very strong offense, but you wanted to see how competitive Delaware State would be. They've had some changes. I think you alluded to, Doc, in this show and earlier, in not only their coaching but how their program is structured. You wanted to see some consistency and see some strength in their football team, especially against a formidable team like this. The game was really not as competitive as you'd like to see if you are a Delaware State fan, and if there's any telltale is looking, you're looking at the stats and you're looking at things. What are their takeaways? They they've got to work on the turnovers, kind of like the game we just discussed. They walked away with 4 turnovers. That is key. And I think, they've made some progress, but I think they have to continue to work in offensive efficiency, giving up points. They gave up, in passing yards, they gave up 183 yards in the air and almost 180 yards rushing. So you'd like to see some consistency on both sides of the ball. They played well in the first quarter. That's all. That's your only takeaway from this game. You'd like to see a little bit more consistency. They've started down that road this year, but we'll see what they look like in the fall.
Yeah, no doubt about it. 362 total yards as you speak of. Going to Joe Clay, any thoughts in terms of this game that you want to share?
Yeah, the turnovers again were huge. They had 3 interceptions. The quarterback only threw for a 5-yard average. That's not going to get it done when you're playing a higher caliber opponent. Your quarterback has to make some plays. They've got to push the ball down the field. You can't have the turnovers. We all know that. In addition to that, they only had 99 yards running. So the offense was just stagnant. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the level of competition of Delaware's defense. I'm sure forced that. They forced those turnovers. They limited that running game. So I think it's just an overall improvement in talent that they need infused within that program, particularly if you're going to be playing an opponent, stepping up in the level of competition and playing an opponent who's one of the best in its conference. So those are the things that stuck out to me. I'm sure their fan base expected a little more competitive game. But overall, yeah, they've got some work to do. But it's the spring. They've got time to make improvements. They've got time to get their quarterback play and their offensive efficiency a little better for the fall, as Mike alluded to. So if I'm a team like Delaware State, I'm using this as a practice time, the spring, and looking for areas of improvement and getting it together for the fall.
Yep.
Talk about passing at 5.1 yards. They only run for 3 yards a carry, so very stagnant on offense. But you're talking about a reconfigured MEAC in the fall. So everybody, to me, has a serious opportunity. South Carolina State, you probably would think the way they're playing would be the cream of the crop, but you have North Carolina Central. They didn't play this spring. Obviously, Morgan State will still be involved with the MEAC. They didn't play this spring. And Howard, and they have room for improvement, obviously, as they did play the spring, but haven't been able to get a victory. So with that, what's going on, and then you have the change at Norfolk State, who you thought probably would be one of the teams in the mix with the head coach leaving to take another job. So in a lot of ways, it is going to be interesting talking about looking forward in regards to what is the fall going to carry for the MEAC in general. With that being said, let Tolly jump in here and have his thoughts on it.
I think yesterday was a win for Delaware State from the standpoint of it was a national TV game, and if you follow some of the things that Delaware State is doing, the business of the campus, academically, a lot of the moves that they are making. It is a very strong institution and growing. So I think when you combine those two things, a solid academic foundation, a president who has a vision, and you see that vision being executed, and then you see if you're a student athlete, you're like, okay, this is a good quality school. Mm-hmm. Hey, they're getting a little exposure. ESPN threw them a bone. And if you're a student athlete looking at that and reimagining yourself and saying, hey, I could have been a difference, I could have helped out. And that makes Delaware State an attractive situation, or at least in the running for some kids in that area with talent. I think that's one thing that you want to look at and say, what kind of positive can we draw from that experience, even though it was 3 yards and a cloud of dust on the football field. That's the brighter side on this Sunday morning.
No doubt about it. Great points made. And I like that you went to the brighter side. Talking about the brighter side may not be the case when you look at Tennessee State. They play today, Southeast Missouri with Tennessee State. We've heard the rumors out there coming from some credible source. It looks like this is the last game for Coach Reed. I knew something, and Charles said something about this last week when we spoke about that tough loss they had, which would have got them to 500, which meant that would have had a chance this week to have a winning record. That will not be the case regardless, and it looks like with the new director changes are coming. So that will be fascinating. This game is at 2:30 today on ESPN Plus. So I'll certainly get a chance to check it out and maybe give you more on Tuesday when we get into it. But I want to know your general thoughts. Tolly, you're always on top of the breaking news. So we're going to go straight to you first. Any thoughts, any comments that you want to make in terms of what you're hearing out there?
This isn't anything we've published, but, like everybody else, my phone is going off yesterday morning. Is Eddie George going to Tennessee State? I don't know. I can't say. I look at Rod Reed, man. Rod Reed is like the Jason Garrett of HBCU football. It's like every year he's going to be fired. Every year this is going to be his last year, and he shows up the next season. But Tennessee State has had some changes with the athletic director, so that can usually signal change in all areas of your athletic department. So I would not be surprised. Tennessee State, hasn't been competitive in the OVC. They've had years where they've had success on their HBCU tour at the beginning of the year for a couple of seasons. I know that people were a little disappointed that they didn't take up the overtures to join the SWAC. But I thought that would be a bad move for Tennessee State, because if they came to the SWAC and didn't compete and found themselves down at the bottom of the cellar, that would take away a lot of the mystique that they do have amongst HBCU fans. So if Eddie George, this is not me, saying that I have any credible information, but just acknowledging what people are saying. I wouldn't be surprised, because when big name coaches kind of become popular, you see other schools start to copy that.
Copycat.
Yeah.
Let me go to you, Joe.
We've seen that in Division II a couple of years ago. A lot of big names in the SIAC. Clark Atlanta was pulling former NBA players and coaches, and that was a thing. And then that kind of settled down. So all these things run in cycles. So nothing would surprise me.
Right, and you see it obviously in the SWAC, basketball first, and now football on the football side. And you've seen it over the years on the women's side for a while. So intriguing when it goes back and forth. And you're right, it goes to these cyclical components, and it's a copycat. If it works for somebody or they're getting a little bang for it, ADs and VPs of athletics come in and say, I want a piece of that. So it'll be interesting to follow. I know Mike put some of this out there as he was getting the feeds as well, but I'm going to go to Joe Clay first quickly on this, and then we'll get into some of these big matchups from the SWAC.
I honestly, for Tennessee State, I honestly hope it's not true, because to my knowledge, Eddie George has spent the last 10 plus years after his career of going for, he acquired an MBA, and he's been working in a business field for the last several years. He has not been coaching. He hasn't been on the field studying X's and O's. So in my estimation, it would be a huge mistake to follow the celebrity coaching hire. And when you say a well-known coach, he's not a coach. So it would be, there's too much talent out there on the coaching levels, the college coaching levels, coordinators and assistant coaches, for you to go and get a supposed big name just for the sake of matching a big name for a big name. Go get somebody who's qualified, who's put in the time, put in the work, and you know that they know how to coach. They know how to recruit. I think they'd be making a huge mistake. And again, it's just a rumor, but if it does come to fruition, hey, I hope it works out for Tennessee State.
No doubt about it. I had similar thoughts from my framework with that way I studied. It goes with that big name frame, but I think there's some uniqueness about Deion Sanders that certainly is different from what you would get in this matchup. But we will see, and I'm certain that you'll hear it fairly much first if you continue to check out HBCU Game Day. If it happens to be true, you'll get the inside scoop. Stick with Tolly Carr and his team. They'll let you know.
I won't make a big point. I know we're running short on time, but the CEO philosophy, it could work for somebody. You don't have to do all the work. You just kind of have to manage it and let the people underneath you do their jobs. Tennessee State does have a couple of former NFL players as volunteer coaches on their staff right now. So
bingo, right there.
Bingo.
Bingo.
And as you said with the CEO, the key component of that is hiring the right people. So you're right. It doesn't matter if you had the experience or don't. The key in terms of leading it, absolutely, is one, I would say before hiring those right people is actually making sure the organizational components, president, athletic director, VP of athletics, your booster group, making sure they're all on the same page. And we can just look down south, the rival, one of the big rivals of in terms of Tennessee State, whether you're looking at Jackson State, specifically FAMU, about how they're all pulling in the same direction. We see how that's going. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I echo all of the points that have been stated. When I first saw it and I was getting some tweets and chats, and all of the tweets and chats had question mark, is Eddie George the new coach? And you don't know what to think. My personal thoughts on it are, at first I was like, Joe, that could be a slap in the face to, coaches who have put their time in the trenches and have worked their way up. But at second, I was like, this is Tennessee State. They hadn't been very competitive in the OVC for the last few years. Some would argue that they've had an identity crisis in terms of determining who they are. There are those who have said that, should they go into the SWAC or shouldn't? There were lots of arguments. So this kind of a topsy-turvy world in Tennessee State. I think organizationally, I think they need some restructuring. Could a big name kind of help them reset that? Like Eddie George, if they have, as Tolly alluded to, maybe the CEO or the businessman approach, as long as you have leadership. But I think you got to fix the organizational issues first, and then maybe that can work. If that is the case, I don't know. Whether that is or not, I'll defer that to HBCU Game Day and Tolly. But you don't know what's going to happen. But can it work under the right circumstances? I think it can work. But I think there's some organizational issues there. I mean, him aside, you've got to get a great functioning organization and somewhat competitive team and formidable coaching staff in place first before you go down that route, or do that in parallel. So,
man, words of the day: identity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Dang,
I agree.
It's just a gut punch. With that, let's get into some of these key matchups, and we'll do this in rapid fire to let everybody close on these thoughts. Obviously, you had the big matchup that is not to be Jackson State Alcorn in terms of that rivalry, classic, and game matchup. Jackson State wins that 2-0 as it's forfeited. But now you have the Grambling Southern Bayou Classic in terms of what that looks like, and then the Alabama A&M Magic City Classic, which becomes huge because essentially it's the de facto game of the week in regards to who will play for east side of the championship for all practical matters. But let's start with that Grambling Southern. Grambling's been off. Southern is playing really well. They want that Pine Bluff game back. Probably it's not going to happen. Yeah, PV at Pine Bluff could make it interesting going to last week if Prairie View can get it done on the road against Pine Bluff. So that's one to keep your eyes on, even though it's not one of your traditional classics that we're talking about. And then last one is that Valley at Texas Southern University in regards to who will get a big win this spring on the field. So that's one. Going to you, Tolly, which of those one or two that you want to talk about that excites you the most in terms of next week?
Well, I think say their name, UAPB. They're still not getting the love, and they can make the claim that they are the best team in the SWAC. They can say that. Who's going to argue with them? Your record is who you say you are. So just a little bit of respect to them. Obviously, if my second Moderna shot that I'm going to get this Friday does not knock me out, I'm going to be at the Magic City Classic in Birmingham. I'm going to be very excited to see this matchup between Nettles and Glass. Nettles reminds me of a Cam Newton type player, very athletic. He can run. He can hit the open receiver. Can he throw them open? I'm not sure yet. But, man, he is a dual-threat quarterback that has to be dealt with. And Glass, he's my Phillip Rivers comp. Whenever I see him, I just think of Phillip Rivers for some reason. So I'm looking forward to this big quarterback matchup coming up next weekend if the shot doesn't take me out.
Shout out to you for the shot. Great points made there. Let's go to Joe Clay to get a little piece. What couple of those games do you want to shout out and look at?
From a pure entertainment perspective, I would love to be at the ASU Alabama A&M game. I would love to make that trip because that quarterback play is going to be phenomenal. But from a fan perspective, my eyes are going to be on the Pine Bluff versus Prairie View A&M game. We haven't played in 3 weeks or so at this point.
Nope.
So Pine Bluff, I think they may be a little sharper than us. They've been playing well, as we all know. Their quarterback has been playing lights out. But Prairie View secondary is a veteran group that has a bunch of talent in it. So I'll be all eyes focused on the Pine Bluff PV game.
No doubt about it. I'm going to go to you, Mike, next. You going to give any love to the Bayou Classic or Valley, Texas Southern, or are you going to stick with the other two matchups?
No,
like Tolly,
no, I got to stick with those two. I think I agree with the entertainment value of the Magic City, but it basically whoever wins that game has the leg up on winning the East. I want to see that offensive explosion, and that's always a good tailgating environment. So I'd like to see, enough people have gotten the shots, what the tailgating would be like in this COVID age as well. I would love to be there. UAPB, I agree, is as advertised. Skylar Perry is as advertised. Kid is playing lights out. Joe said it. PV hasn't played in nearly a month. So can they step it up and play against a UAPB team who is playing efficient football on both sides of the ball? So I think, to me, that is a key matchup, especially coming out of the West. I know Southern would like to have that game back, but I'm looking for them to perform really well in the Bayou Classic. I think they have a chip on their shoulder. I think they have something to prove after losing the UAPB, and I think they'll exercise some demons against Grambling. But if I'm wanting to see a game, I have to pick the same two that Tolly and Joe picked for obvious reasons.
Well, while I would love to stand out and talk about the Grambling Southern game, Bayou Classic, it's always big. Obviously, Southern is playing well, and they're going to want to make their final statement against their rival. Grambling is going to want to find a way to make their season right, so I think that's fascinating. You all jumped in there and said, in terms of the importance of Prairie View UAPB, the Alabama State, Alabama A&M Magic City Classic speaks for itself in terms of the importance of it. So I'm going to give a little love to Mississippi Valley and Texas Southern University. I think for those two programs, it's extremely important in terms of who plays well in that game, who gets that victory going into the fall. Because I think quietly, while those programs are rebuilding, and it shouldn't be like that, with all the hype that everybody else is getting, those coaches are going to find themselves on the tough side of a lot of the fans having questions. Not saying it's right, but I think that's just the nature of the business. And that's why I think that particular game becomes a little more important in many different ways for me. And so I have certainly at least one eye on terms of that matchup. That'll do it for us today. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As we said, Charles Bishop is out on assignment. No, he's not hiding. He'll be back on do my boy like that.
Where you at, CB? Let's talk about Valley.
Him and Prime are in their prayer closet.
Hey, culture, giving us that love. Make sure you tune in and subscribe to that 1876 Sports and Culture podcast, none other than the Tolly Carr. You know what it is, HBCU Game Day. Go to YouTube, subscribe, get all that hot information. Go to the websites. They continue to give it to you like none other. And check it out. I sneak and make a preview coming up in one of the episodes with some professors at Texas Southern University. So I'm going to sneak and tease you with that a little bit, as you know how to do it. You taught me very well, Tyler, how to make sure we get it in. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday. And now that special weekend edition on Sunday. Sneak it. We'll get it in for you. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest news in the lab. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyattaCavil on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Also follow Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter. As we say, get on YouTube. We need you to subscribe. Dream big. Continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Make sure you go to BCSN and download the app as well. That is extremely important. With that, for Joe Clay, for Tolly, Mike, course,
lecture,
dismiss.
Miss you, Charles.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay